Well, hey there. Welcome to Conversations in Color. We're just kicking off season 2 here. Last week was our first episode of season 2. We had Dr. Salika Ducksworth-Lawden and Amy Renshaw from the Conversations in Color team here with us, and we were just talking about why we care about social justice and racial justice and equity and all those kinds of things. And it was great to catch up with them. And then this week, I got the chance to sit down with Dr. Rod Jones, who's also part of the leadership team here with Conversations in Color, and Sheng Elizabeth Lohr, who is the mastermind behind the Social Exchange Project. And we had just a great conversation about intersectionality and the tendency to dehumanize folks that disagree with us, and learning how to be gracious toward folks who disagree with us. It was just a great and rich conversation, and I'm excited that you're going to be a part of it here with us. But before we launch into it, I want to take a moment and thank our incredible sponsors. First of all, Shift Cyclery and Coffee Bar, who has provided this great venue for us to do the show, and also some wonderful drinks to enjoy while we're doing the show. Want to thank Converge Radio 101.9 FM, Pablo Center at the Confluence, as well as our friends at the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire. Without these sponsors, this thing doesn't happen, and so we're really grateful for them. So without further ado, I invite you into the conversation. Man, it's good to be with you two. It's been a long time, really, for both of you. It's been a little bit longer for you since I had a chance to.
Yeah, it's been a year
to hang out. So
yeah, wow.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it?
Year and a half, maybe. I don't know.
Well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It ain't right.
Doesn't feel right.
Well, I'm really excited to be hanging out with the two of you, Sheng and Rod, and man. For people who don't know, like Rod, you're at the university teaching up, and you are working on the city council, and then you got big time responsibilities on the home front right now.
Have a newbie.
Yep. So sleep is at a premium.
Yep. Sleep is a premium right now, indeed.
Yep. Yep. And then Sheng, you work with the state and then you've also got the podcast, the Social Exchange Project, right?
I sure do. Yeah, we're starting back up with our season 3. I'm talking to my cameraman back there. Season 3.
Yeah.
And it's been a little while, but I'm excited to get back into things and just have everything go back to normal-ish. New normal.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the great part about tonight is, we're just going to take some time and really just kind of catch up. It's been a while, and Conversations in Color has... we were on a bit of a hiatus for a while and just getting going here with season 2. And really, I just want to hang out with y'all and hear, what's keeping you engaged with this effort, and, things that relate to what we talk about on Conversations in Color. So, Sheng, I'll really start with you. Both of you were there at the beginning when we first started Conversations in Color. What's the draw for you? Like, why are you interested in this?
Honestly, when I had first, so if we go back, I met you-ish virtually through Juneteenth. I think that was back in, I'm going to probably have the year wrong, 2019 maybe, 2018?
I think it was 2020.
Was it 2020?
I think it was the virtual...
It was a couple years ago, and
Okay.
so I was just really engaged in how you were facilitating conversation and the way that you went about different topics, and I don't know, I was just really inspired by you. I've told you that a lot of times, and so I invited you and Dr. Salika, who is our boss woman around here, who runs she's in every single thing going on in Eau Claire. I'm very privileged to have her as a friend, but I met both of you, and you came on my show, and we talked about a lot of different topics that at that time I can honestly say I was not super, I wouldn't say it was like, I just wasn't as well educated. I was in a place where I was really still learning. I still feel like I'm a forever student. I'll probably still be learning for the rest of my life, and I'm okay with that. But there were so many questions that I had. I remember sending you the pre-interview questions, and you're like, I have no idea how we're going to have this conversation because they were big questions. I don't know if you remember that. But part of the reason why I wanted to sign up with you two for Conversations in Color was I really wanted to genuinely learn through conversation and just meeting people and knowing more about, that's essentially my platform, is knowing more about things and views and perspectives through people. So that was the reason why. But yeah, it's been a journey. I feel like we've had a lot of really good trial and errors, and we learn more and more about what we want, both on my show and Conversations in Color, like what we want out there as content. And so, yeah, it's just been really nice to be asked to come back and hang out.
You know, you won a very near and dear place in my heart when you brought me Coke Zero for my birthday.
And
last
cupcakes
year.
that nobody ate.
I ate one. I think we had some folks took some home, so I know that I'm pretty sure they got eaten.
Okay, good. Good deal.
Catch me on the wrong day and I might eat all the cupcakes. So I'm just so glad that you're here. And Rod, you know, you were a part of the very first show in season 1.
Yeah.
You know, why are you still in on this?
Yeah, you know, for me, it all began with an email. You know, an email that I received from you, Ed. You know, before you and I had ever met. You know, you mentioned that Dr. Salika Ducksworth-Lawton had mentioned my name, and you know, I may be a good person to be a part of this team, right? In terms of the scope of what you all were trying to do. And when I read the email and got a better understanding of some of the tenets behind this show, right? Humility and all those pieces that you talked about, continue to talk about. For me, it just seemed like a good venue to be a part of, right? In our society today, there's just so much fragmentation, right? So much fragmentation, uncivil conversation, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of just castigation, right? And so I thought that this would be a good way for those of us from varying backgrounds, right, who hold very different viewpoints, lived experiences, and otherwise, to kind of come to the table and say, listen, even though we're very different, right, we're all human, right? And we all can still engage in meaningful conversations, you know, on topics that we may find completely different orientations around. Yet there's something to be said about how we arrive at some type of, you know, solution and or just discussion, general discussion about, you know, what those conversations entail for us as individuals and as a collective, right? And so I think that being a part of this show allows us to be able to do that. And in fact, to be an exemplar for other people. And I think in that way, you know, I believe that we do our city, you know, and, you know, I wanted to say our society, but that's a bit of a stretch perhaps. But, you know, for those who are listening to the show, I hope, right, wherever you are, that we contribute to that, you know, so, yeah.
I mean, it's always good to hope we can change the world, you know?
Yeah,
but if
absolutely.
we can, I mean, that's it. I mean, we're getting ready to go into the holiday season here, and you know, people are going to be having meals with family, and we, you know, often those conversations at the table or after dinner or whatever can turn to politics, social issues, whatever, and maybe, you know, through example, we can provide some avenues for folks to have conversations in those contexts where it doesn't have to end up with I hate you and you're a demon and you know whatever, but like we can disagree. It's interesting, you know, what you're talking about that. I was listening to a podcast today in which the guest on the podcast was talking about that whole idea of you know, demonizing, degrading people versus just, you know. And one of the examples she brought up, and it's something I really had to wrestle with a little bit, is talking about how, you know, just because somebody voted for President Trump doesn't mean that they're racist.
Sure.
And like in my mind, I had made that was the connection that I had made. Even it's not a legit thing. I mean, there are obviously questions and conversation you can have around those things, but it revealed to me again how much work I've got to do, you know, to keep from, you know, let's have these conversations and actually lean in on them. Part of me wants to insulate with people who think like I do, so I don't have to deal with that kind of stuff.
I think that's a natural thing.
Yeah. So you're saying I'm not the only one who?
No, of course not. I feel like, like even just to talk about racism, such a like, I don't know, people define it so differently. Like I feel like people define it as like an individual standalone event. Sometimes people look at it like it is essentially an institution versus it is like an event or person.
Right.
And so, yeah, you're not alone in that. Like, I don't think that we're all like really done learning. Like, just because I'm a woman of color doesn't mean I know everything about what people of color go through, specifically a woman of color, what they go through, because we do have our individual experiences in that, but we are within a system as well. So, yeah, I'm interested in knowing what that podcast is. You should send that to me.
Well, it's called The Bible for Normal People, and it was actually, I think...
I'm not normal, so can I
Well, I still listen to it even though I'm
Okay.
not qualified. But yeah, it was with a journalist, and I can't remember her name, but it was very poignant about just that whole idea of let's keep the humanity in this and recognize the value in people. And, even as much as I preach that stuff, sometimes those patterns of, classifying people into certain categories is still there.
Yeah, we'll never be able to shake or free ourselves of implicit bias. I mean, we all fall prey to some degree, form, or fashion of essentializing, right?
Yeah.
And but however, when we find ourselves doing that, right, we have to turn that reflexive lens back on ourselves and question, why are we doing this, right? And
you said essentializing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think what it is we kind of sometimes or oftentimes have a tendency, right, to think that, our way of thinking is the preeminent way, right? But I think when we find ourselves in that trap, right, we have to question our orientations and be willing to confront those, right, to unpack those many layers embedded in those orientations. And I think people who are willing to do that, people who are willing to hold themselves accountable, right, when they find themselves in that trap, I think can better work through those issues as opposed to people who are just dismissive, right, and refuse to open up the door, right, for a different way of thinking, right, a different way of being. And I think when we can get there, we're in a better place collectively.
That essentializing is the idea behind that you're basically breaking somebody down to what you think their essence is and then judging them accordingly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's so easy to do.
Yeah.
It's much easier than nuance.
Yeah.
Recognizing everybody's got different stories and
Yeah.
backgrounds and such.
Well, people have different intersectionalities, and I think that's really what it is. But excuse me, like just kind of going off of what you were saying, I do think that part of the journey is really being humble. Like I think it just comes back down to humility and empathy for another person, and really listening to them, no matter how opposing their views are and how angry and emotional you get. Like I think it just comes down to just like being a human being and empathetic to another person who has very little in common with you. That's kind of how I do things. Like I try to genuinely have a connection with somebody and understand where their perspectives are, even if I disagree. I think that doesn't solve all the problems. We can't change the world. We can change the world around us a little bit in that regard, So I like what you were saying.
Yeah, it's you make an excellent point. This notion of humility. It's one of those things where it's not something that is easily taught, right? I mean, as much as we try to instill that in our kids, it's one of those things that ultimately we kind of have to make a choice, right? Whether or not that is going to be
which takes effort,
right? Right, absolutely, right. And so, just being humble. I really like the fact that you highlighted that. I think that's very important when you can kind of step outside of yourself, right, and try to take on, right, perhaps what others might be experiencing or whatever it may be, right, to try to release your own
ego, really.
Ego, yeah. I mean, absolutely, and I think that's huge. That is huge.
Yeah, I think that's when you think about it. You've got the humility from the angle of I don't know what you've experienced. I don't know what you've experienced, and not just as a black man, as an Asian American woman, among American women, but like just as people, individuals. You know, what kind of family you grew up in, and what was that environment like? Was it
And our
supportive?
race is just a part of our identity.
Right.
It's not our whole identity.
Right.
Like it influences certain experiences that we have, which, you know, kind of defines who we become in some ways, but it's not our whole selves.
Right.
You know?
No, that's right. And so there's that, like, recognizing that we don't know the nuances of everybody's story. And then there's just the fact that we just don't know a lot. I mean, honestly, the older I get, the more convinced I am of how little I actually know with certainty. You know, there's some things that I know, but I'm humbled on the regular. You know, like when I recognize how small my frame of reference is for understanding life and understanding other people, and I keep coming back to how important it is for me to embrace uncertainty about a great number
And
of things.
discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like that though.
I don't think anybody likes.
I don't like it.
I don't think anybody
but
likes
like Shane
discomfort.
said earlier, I mean,
you
it
know?
requires work.
It
does.
does.
Right.
Like cognitive work. It's a
Right.
lot of energy you put in it.
Yeah.
And it's intentional energy that you put into something. Like if it's meaningful to you or important to you, you'll do it. Or sometimes like it's if you don't have to worry about it. I actually watched the last episode that you made this comment where it's like you were able to just turn everything off and not worry about social justice. Like, you know, I was able to kind of do the same, and I'm a
Yeah.
woman of color. Like I sometimes can flip it on and off, and I can say that, you know, sometimes you obviously have to have boundaries and self-care and all those things, but I do have certain privileges that allows me that too. And so just being humble and knowing that certain things are afforded to you that not other people have,
Yeah.
those same things that they're dealing with every day. And so, yeah, that gives me a lot of humility.
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is, I remember the first time I heard the word neurodivergence. I wasn't familiar with that word until I heard Salika use it in a
I need to
conversation.
define it now.
Yeah, just basically meaning people whose like the way they think and the way they process information, like everybody's processes information differently. And so you have a group of people that some might consider normal when it comes to neural processing and thinking and stuff. And then you have other folks who, you know, are somewhere else on the spectrum. And the truth is we're all on that spectrum. You know, like, I think that's the problem. That's another one of the categorizations is like, this is what normal is.
Right.
When really there's no real normal. Like everybody's spread across this spectrum of different kinds of ability and ways you process understanding, process knowledge and whatever. And so, I just think, and race to an extent is like that. I mean, you trace lineage back to, you know, I'm sure you could trace my lineage back to whatever it is in Northwestern Europe, you know. But like, there's still nuance throughout that. Like, you know, the racial ethnic heritage that I'm from, there's branches here and there, different influences from different groups, and everybody is like that.
Yeah.
You know? And so like I just keep thinking about that, about how unique each person is with their story, and I think that in itself should be humbling. Like if you're going to really care about other people, that in itself I think is pretty humbling.
Right.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing, Rod, a little bit about, you know, you've been working with the city council now for a little while here in Eau Claire.
Congratulations. by the
Thank
way.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's that experience been like?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I think for me, it's been, on the one hand, very enriching. Enriching in that it gives me the privilege, using your word, you know, Shane, a little bit earlier, to really understand in full complexity the issues that confront us as a city, right? And having that privilege afforded to me, right, to be able to have access to certain information and knowledge, right, and be able to very adroitly, you know, study the information in ways perhaps that, you know, other people can't because they may not be as privy to that information. And then as I'm helping make decisions based on this information, to really hear from the residents of our town, right, of our city, and to use those voices to help inform my decision making. You know, and you kind of hear about this, right, when you're watching television, or you think about, you know, the the nuances of politics, right? But when you're in that role and position, it becomes much more tangible, right? And you really have a full effect, right, for the power of your decision making in that capacity. And so it's been very, I'm going to use the word humbling here, right? Because you really have to step outside of yourself, right? And think about, what do the denizens of Eau Claire want, right? As you're making these decisions, and you're not just basing those decisions on your own volition, right? You're really taking into account to what people are saying. And so that's been very humbling, very enriching, very just overall cathartic and rewarding for me to do this work in this capacity, and to know that the decisions that I'm making having a tangible effect on people, in ways that I haven't been able to do that directly in the past.
Yeah, that's great.
Can I ask a
so-
question? I feel like I'm
absolutely.
not used to being on this other side of the table. I'm like a very curious person.
Other questions are totally
I
legit.
know. I'm
absolutely.
sorry. I have other questions. Have you found in a situation or an event in which you felt conflicted about decisions that you were making that wasn't maybe like super in alignment with what your values are? Because you're representing a group of people now, not yourself, right?
Absolutely.
So just following up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question.
Sorry, I wasn't trying.
No, that's a great
that's
question.
That's a
That's
very good
perfect.
question. Yes, there have been some. There have been some, and I think for me, when I find myself in that situation, I try to take more of a utilitarian approach, right? And what I mean by that is, the good of the many kind of outweighing the good of the few. And so I want to make sure that when I find myself in that conflict, right, that I'm thinking about the greatest possible positive impact, right? Doesn't always make me feel good, right, that I have to disappoint some people,
Right.
but in the end, that is kind of what helped guide me, and in the end, I feel like if I have made the appropriate decision, right, that I can sleep well.
Yeah.
Knowing that, there was no malevolence or ill will behind my decision making, right? And so that's kind of what guides me when I find myself in conflict. Just really trying to do what's best on behalf of all the citizens of Eau Claire. So that's a very good question, though.
Yeah, I could never be in politics, so I commend you.
Yeah, I had somebody once who told me, I could totally see you being like a senator. And I'm like, then I was like, okay, because, it kind of spoke to my ego.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, eh.
I will
don't
say,
think so.
I just had lunch with our dear friends, Dr. Salika and David Carlson, a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago. And as they're talking, right, I feel like I'm just a sponge listening to everything they're
Yes.
saying. And I joke around with David Carlson all the time, like, gosh, I need like a Carlson 101 class or something, like about the work that he's doing. And I joke, but he obviously, I told him, like, you should go into politics. Like, there's so many aspects of what he says that resonates with me a lot. And obviously he's in school with for law school, and he's doing 500 other things. He has his own business and things. But yeah, like, I'd like to see and support people who I feel are really natural leaders in that role. But I myself could never be.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I have ego, but not like that.
I support Rod. I'll just support Rod.
I do. I support you too. We had a conversation about that as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
really happy
you have to
you're
feel
here.
great because, like, I'm sure growing up in South Florida,
Yeah.
you dreamt of being a city council member in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So you finally made it.
I arrived, man. I've had my Jeffersonian moment. if you're familiar with the Jeffersons TV show back in the day.
Oh, yes. Yep, absolutely.
Moving on up.
Absolutely. I used to watch that show on syndication just
Yeah.
about every night.
I can't fully relate right now, so I'm just gonna,
Yeah, I know, because we're old.
You're not old. I just can't relate.
Relatively speaking. So talk, Shang, talk about, you mentioned how you're used to kind of being the interviewer and asking the
really
questions. Let's talk about Social Exchange Project and what you're trying to accomplish with that.
I don't know. Like, when we had a lot of these conversations off. I feel like sidebar conversations. But when it started, it was actually like 2 years ago, a couple days ago, we went to see IV Studio And I was like, I'm just gonna start this project. It was a way for me to learn more about who I was, like kind of work on my communication skills. I talked to you a lot about the anxiety behind like public speaking, or just in general having conversations with people on camera. Like I don't like being on camera. I don't actually know why I'm here, but I get anxiety sometimes, and it was just a way for me to challenge myself. And it was also something that was going to be fun for me and my friend, and we have my friend Addie, and we had friends that we wanted to like elevate and provide a platform for them. So that's really how it started. Yeah. But now, like years later, like it's something that means a lot to me. It has become an extension of who I am, and so I really handpick the people that come on my show, like even Dr. Salika, and just people that really mean a lot to me, people I believe in. And so call it implicit bias or whatever you say, but I really pick like people that is really going to be a part of like this archived like content of things that have like, I don't know, like represent my evolution as a person too. And so now I feel like it's just really trying to get out there and being intentional about picking people who are in different communities of color, people who are normally like would be considered marginalized individuals, and they're talented people. So I really focus on entertainment, education, and social impact. And so I love what I do. It's a nice passion project on the side, and I get to talk a lot.
Maybe one day it can be
fun.
not just a passion project. That'd be all right.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. I think what makes it a passion is that it's a project right now.
I totally get that. When it becomes a job, then it's something else.
Yeah, my brain doesn't work like that. So yeah, like it has become something that is really, really important to me, and I put a lot of time into it. And so yeah, back with season 3 and working really hard and trying new things with my cameraman, who's also behind the scenes, my brother actually, with Film Traverse, and we're trying a lot of different ideas, and it's our season where we want to be even more authentic and more real about meeting people where they're at, and like maybe going into their environments versus like, our creepy in the basement studio. It's not really creepy, it's really nice, but like going into their space and seeing how they operate, and just like, like that's kind of what we're trying this season. Cool. And I don't know, we'll see how it goes.
I love that.
That's nice.
We're gonna have more jokes. I'm just kidding.
You do great on camera, by the way.
Really? Thank you.
You do, absolutely.
Stop it, keep going. I'm kidding.
Stop it, keep going.
I really like that, because it really gets at that social piece, right? Vis-a-vis social project. I like that slant that you guys are considering taking.
Yeah. So we just want it to be really like, the hardest part about this whole journey for me has been like having to put myself out there. I'm really always focused on the guest and the person's story. And so when people are like, well, we want to know more about you, I'm like, no, like focus on the guest. So that I'm going to try and just stay true to that, because like, I'm just somebody who wants to make that person like more enhanced in their environment, so I'm really very, very secondary. They're the primary. And so me going into their spaces and learning more about what they do and the people that they interact with every day, like that's more interesting to me. So that's what I want to put out there.
Yeah, it sounds like you're trying to avoid the cult of celebrity.
Yes.
Right? Because celebrity, right, has a different trap. And I think, once people regard you as a celebrity, right, there's this...
Even on a local level.
Even on a local level, right? I mean, there's a certain, persona, right, that we're expected to live up to, right? Yeah. And so when you think about, using some of your terms, ego, humility, right, and what it means, right, to avoid this idea of being considered, a celebrity, even if local, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure there. Like, I just want to be me, and like, I don't know. I think I'm pretty much myself in most environments anyway, but yeah, I agree with you. There is a lot of pressure, and I am friends with people that are pretty well known in the area, and they do struggle with the same thing too. It's like there's that persona, because everyone's a little bit of everything. I always say that. Like everyone really, really, truly is, and the people that I have come to know and like really love, and like I'm a fan of theirs, but I'm also like, I really admire them as human beings. Like they struggle with the same thing. Like they want to be able to just have a little bit of normalcy sometimes, and they don't get that. But I'm not I can't relate at all. So I don't know where this celebrityism term comes from.
It's interesting though, Shane, because like I went to register or to pick up some stuff for Charlotte, my wife, last year, at like a race that she was doing, or maybe it was earlier this year, and like pick up the T-shirts or whatever in the registration package, and the lady knew who I was from Conversations in Color, and I was like blown away that like somebody recognized who I was just from looking at me, you know, and it's what's interesting is that particular incident didn't spawn this line of thinking, but I started I've thought a lot about when you become known for something in a community, you do have to be cognizant of how you are representing yourself in different, you know, because for me it's not just about me representing myself, it's representing Converge Radio because I work at Converge Radio, and then also Conversations in Color. And so like even with, I think it's the reason I hardly ever post anything on social media anymore, because there's this part of me that's afraid that I'm going to say something that somebody's going to attach to me and then start questioning like where I am on certain things socially, politically, whatever. And I kind of hate that, to be honest with you.
Right. So, you know, within our respective lives, right, we all occupy many fields, right? And so, you know, if I think about, you know, Rod Jones, the professor, you know, when I'm in that field, right, there's a certain habitus that I live by that guides my behavior, right? When I'm, you know, council member Jones, right, there's a certain field that guides my behavior, right? And so we all do that, given the fields that we occupy, you know, from day to day within certain spaces and places and so on and so forth. Even when I, you know, go to the grocery store, you know, I have to be cognizant of the fact that, you know, I'm Council Member Jones. You know, so I have to, you know, behave in a certain way, and you know, and so we all do that.
You can't cuss like important. A sailor, like you do, like in the classroom and stuff.
Right. So you know, it's just interesting. It's just you know, I think we're very that's how socially we're oriented, right? And so it's neither good or bad, but I think it's informative.
It's reality.
Yeah, it's informative. It's in reality. Right?
I think I probably have less pressure than you do. I feel like I have a lot of that too, because, you know, I work for the county, and the population I work with are individuals with mental health, and, you know, they're usually pretty serious situations where they're struggling with substance use, and, you know, you want to not represent or misrepresent yourself and your employer and the work that you do, because there's a level of respect there. But at the same time, it's like, I'm a human being too. Like, I like to have fun. I like to do other things. It's like, I'm not just defined by that. We just talked about that. Like, I'm more than just my race and my gender and my occupation and things like that. So yeah, I think I totally agree that there's different ways that you should behave, and, you know, there's probably pressures tied to whatever that persona is in that environment. But I really like being myself.
No, that's good. I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Totally.
But I get that too. Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I think, you know, I think about it in terms of I don't really want to compartmentalize my life.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I want to be able to be a whole person and be that same person no matter what the context is. And
well, we like music a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and like I can see us still going to like open mics and doing all those things and not have to worry as much about, you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
But that's on brand. So
is it on brand?
What I mean by that is like, you would expect somebody who's like socially conscious to be involved in arts and things like that. There's that kind of stereotype. You know, where it gets different is where I talk about being from an evangelical background, you know, and growing up in a very conservative household, and how does that mesh then with the rest of this, you know? And I'm not that person. Like, I'm not an evangelical, and I'm not terribly conservative, but at the same time, like, that stuff influenced me growing up. I'd be foolish to say otherwise. And so there's just different nuances and different, like we were talking about before, everybody has different experiences and backgrounds and such. And so I want to live my life in a way where I'm not always conscious about how this is going to get taken and this is going to get taken. But,
it's hard though. It's harder to say it than to actually do. But yeah, I think living authentically and being happy and like truly as long as you're not like hurting other people and like the stuff, the different roles that you're in, I guess, hats that you're wearing. Like, I feel like it is really healthy to just be yourself. Unapologetically.
Yep.
I don't know. Well, I'm not trying to be on the opposite
but
side.
That's where it gets really messy and muddy, right?
Yeah.
Because, when you think about the current state of affairs, and there's a lot of people who believe that, my position, is my position. I'm not hurting anybody. And this is what I believe. And, so why should I adopt your orientation or change my perspective, right? If I'm not hurting you. But, then it gets messy, right? Because that's where
there's social reactions.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so that's where those very fragmented orientations, right, whether they be political or otherwise, can become very poisonous, civically speaking.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
But can we like apply this okay, sorry.
No,
I feel like if we apply this to like racism or the institution of racism, like let's say it's like mainstream media is to be more whitewashed or something. Like I can understand, like I've done that to just survive, growing up, like just to survive. And, I would say I still deal with a lot of guilt of not like knowing my native language the way that I would like to. Sure. But it was me adopting and surviving, and I do have a little bit of like grief and loss over experiences that I could have had if I would have been more authentic in who I was, and so, and my culture and my parents and things like that. And so it is really difficult, but if we were to apply kind of what we're talking about in terms of like racism, like I wouldn't want to be navigating through the world to please other people and like be more in alignment with what other people should see me as versus me just being who I am in all spaces. So yeah, it's a hard one.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. I didn't think this was going to get so deep, but
no, it's good. It's good though. I mean, that's you talk about grieving, not being as connected with your home heart culture,
like my native language, my cultural roots,
And that's that's real, and there's a lot of people who can't relate to that dynamic. The Hmong American experience is unique, and aside from your own unique story, that story in itself is unique.
I think just the refugee experience is. There's a lot of people. Like we talked about a lot of this. So Dr. Ye Zhang, who had been on my podcast, she had started a group called Hmong Women Rising. We have these discussions like every month, where they're not like. They're pretty free like this, but there are some overarching topics and things that we talk about. And the last couple conversations had been around this grief of not really knowing where you came from, because when we were the first generations to we were born and raised here in America, being conflicted with do we want to be more Hmong so that we are considered Hmong to our parents and grandparents and otherwise, or do we want to be more white so that we fit in at school and survive in the culture that we're living in, because not other people can adopt to you, so you have to adapt to them. And so we had these conversations, and there are a lot of people who feel the same way I feel, and they are very unique experiences. And I don't really know what the answer to that is, except just like going back and understanding your roots and things like that. But I was on a podcast a couple weeks ago and I talked about this, but one of the interviewers had asked me is it harder for you because you're a woman of color in certain spaces, X, Y, and Z, in white spaces, was kind of what she was trying to say. And I just said, it's really, I feel like this is maybe not the healthiest thing to say, but it is my truth. I feel like I do really well in white spaces. And I thought a lot about that afterwards. And I kind of knew this was true, but I thought about this afterwards and I said, I do well in white spaces because that's all I ever knew to survive. And so I want to go back and understand more about other cultures, not just my own, but other cultures. And it comes back to humility. I don't know everything. The more you think you know, the less you actually really do know. So,
yeah. I think that's is something, you've mentioned privilege before, Rod. And I think about that place of privilege that I come from, where I don't have to think about those kinds of cultural. My family has been in the United States for generations, as far back as I know. I don't know which ship we came over on, but when I think about that, you know, I've been able to be in a situation where everybody talks like me and most people look like me from the very beginning, and that has afforded me the opportunity to not, and the privilege to not have to think about those
Like
kinds
the
of things.
anxiety in those situations.
Right.
Yeah.
But there is something to, like, you talked about wanting to learn about other cultures and stuff, that being willing to put yourself in a position where you're not, everybody doesn't look like you and talk like you. Like you're doing it not from survival, but because you want to expand and learn and
Energy and work. It's intentional work.
yeah, but it's super rewarding, you know.
It's hard, but it's rewarding.
Yeah. I was listening to a dude, same podcast. I'm a one-trick pony.
You need to send me all these
all the time. But that's because I'm old. So the podcast thing is, you know, I'm still wanting to listen to, you know, music if I have my headphones on, not somebody talking to me. But unless it's sports radio. Anyway, so
You just made me think of like CD players and
yeah,
Walkmans.
I have had those and cassette players
Me
and
too.
our turntable.
Me too.
But on this podcast, the gentleman he's a theologian, and he teaches at some, you know, really prestigious school. I can't remember which one it was. Black man, and he was talking about racial justice, racial equity issues in the context of the church, the Christian church. And one of the things he talked about was the need for white Christians to become black. And what he meant by that is identifying yourself with the group that's been marginalized, oppressed, you know, that you can't relate to because it's not your heritage, it's not where you grew up, it's not your background. But there was something powerful in that notion to me of becoming black and identifying yourself with the person that has been considered the other, you know. It's just interesting thinking about, you talk about all these intersectionalities. My brain is just functioning on all cylinders right now.
I was listening a lot to like
intersectionalities.
Kimberly Crenshaw, actually, the founder of Intersectionality, and I actually had Dr. Komping Pa from the university too, who's on. We talked about that, and I learned so much through that. And but yeah, like I think just going back to like what you were saying a little bit about. I don't know. There's so much there, so I'm trying to unpack. There's a lot, but and
I mean, we got about 15 minutes. We got plenty of time to unpack everything and solve all
Here's
the
the
world's
thing.
justice
I'm learning
and
on
equity
trying to be a
issues.
better active listener. I like try not to like chime in right away when I have something I want to say. But yeah, I don't even know where I was gonna go with that. No, it's okay. I just talk a lot, and then my thoughts they come and go. But yeah, like I do think the intersectionality piece is really huge. Like, you know, me being a woman of color, or I should say Hmong, first generation in America, having two parents, socioeconomically, I am all right. Like, you know, there's all these different things that influence the way that I've navigated and seen the world, and even just the way I see myself, you know? And so talking to other people who may have a lot of the same intersectionalities, have totally different experiences, and just taking that into account too, you know, maybe they didn't have the same type of, maybe they came from a single parent household, maybe they, you know, really experienced a lot of trauma and abuse and things like that. And so, I don't know, I think part of the human experience is really understanding who you are, and then really listening, something I'm working on, listening to another person and validating their experiences and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think when we allow ourselves to be placed in those positions where we become the situational other, right? We can enter into a space of transformation, even if it's temporal, right? Because that experience can be earthquaking. We allow ourselves within the context of that information to experience, if only in a minuscule way, right? How the other, historically excluded other, right? Experience the world. Right? Now, we may not be able to get to that level of understanding in all of its complexity and totality, right? But at least we get a glimpse of it. You know, and that can be if you're genuinely engaged in the process of trying to understand, right, how others, you know, experience and live the world, right? It can be transformational, right? If you're willing to work through that, you know, and I like Shing's expression about how it takes mental work, right? And that's the piece where I think a lot of people fall short, right? Because it becomes, right, once we step outside of that, it eviscerates. We forget about it, right? But it takes the work to continuously re-engage in that experience, right? Whether it's, literally physically putting yourself in a space situationally, or, right, allowing your mental capacity to go there and work through that.
And being okay with being super uncomfortable.
Right. Absolutely. So, these are things that, like you say, cause a lot of discomfort. And unfortunately, we don't like discomfort.
No.
Right? And especially if it requires us to do a self-analysis and critique. Right?
Yeah.
And because that could be painful. That goes beyond
You got
discomfort.
to take inventory of yourself
Right.
before you can even start looking outward.
Right. That goes beyond discomfort. That can be visceral. That
Painful.
can be very painful.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people don't want to go there.
Right.
Right. Because it can become, for many, very dark, very quick.
But that's where it's hard, right? Like,
Right.
You were talking about earlier, Rod, you have folks who have certain viewpoints politically, socially, whatever, that serve to maintain the status quo.
Sure.
And, they would say they're not racist, they're not sexist, they're not, homophobic, whatever. But the truth is the way that they vote, maybe, and certainly the things that they hold to and the things that they say they believe, keep the structure in place, And so if you're in that spot and you're like, well, there's nothing wrong, I'm not hurting anybody, this is what I believe, why would you ever want to do that kind of work and experience that discomfort and potential pain, if you're in that spot? And how do we respond to that as people who want to be agents of
Change.
justice and reconciliation and change and all these things,
I think like if you don't acknowledge there's a problem, you will never solve it.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where that, I shouldn't, because I'm kind of guilty of it too. Like sometimes I can sit here, and I definitely can say like there's a lot of stuff that I'm still learning and things like that. But it is, really hard to acknowledge problems because then you have to do something about it or you feel cognitively responsible to do something about it. So it's easier to just say there isn't a problem, therefore rids you of your responsibilities.
Yeah. So a huge part of the problem is how we define the problem.
Yeah. Yep, it's true.
Yes.
So your definition of the problem, my definition of the problem, right, can be completely different things, right? And so because there's so much variability in how we define the problem, right, therein lies the rub.
Yeah.
That's why we can never really get to a consensus, if you will, right,
Yeah.
of what the problem is and how do we go about triaging it. And I used the word earlier, fragmentation, because that's a lot of what we're dealing with in our society right now. A lot of fragmentation, and it's very disconcerting, right? Because, I think about, if you think about, I guess, some of the ideals upon which this country was constructed, right? Of course, we know that many of those ideas are problematic. We know that from the very, genesis, from their orientation, right? But I think as we go farther and farther into this world of entertainment, right, through these different mediums, right, how we're constructing our sense of I don't know, a national agency, as a collective, as citizens of this country, it's becoming increasingly fragmented, right? Because everybody defines the problem in there. So I guess if we step back, if we think about, for example, perhaps, when we had, Russia as the enemy, right, of the Cold War area, right? There was a unified front.
Right.
There was a unified, all-encompassing idea, right, of what it meant to be an American, right, and who was the foe.
Yeah.
Do we have that today?
Right.
I mean, everybody and everything is the foe.
That's it. That's it. I think you're right on. Like,
and
you
so
have to have an other
right.
to make you feel okay about
Absolutely.
how you live life and your worldview and
But
whatever.
now everybody is the problem. Everybody is the foe.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at there, at least where it takes my mind, is there's something fundamentally flawed in human nature or in just the way we do things historically, traditionally, where we have to have an enemy.
Like
you know?
us versus them mentality.
Right. And I would argue it's interesting that we're walking down this path because it's just something I've thought about a little bit. I remember Salika at one of the rallies in the last couple of years talking about how, like, she made the statement about we are all Americans, and I didn't care about that statement. Just frankly, like, that statement to me didn't resonate, didn't have any kind of emotional tug or pull on me. And I think this is one of those areas where I'm saying something somebody's probably not going to like, but whatever. I'm just not a big time patriotic guy. I'm just not. I look at the history of America and I look at some of the things you were just talking about, some of the fundamental flaws that have been there from the very beginning.
Conflict, yeah.
I don't care about appealing to other people as Americans. I think the issue is humanity. It goes deeper. Like, we hated the Russians. That was wrong too. You know what I mean? Like, those are people too. And like, we want to hate, there are people who want to hate everybody in the Middle East or anybody who wears a turban.
Right.
Because they associate that with terrorism. And it's like, okay, but those are people.
Sure.
Even the terrorists are people. That doesn't, not excusing anything that they've done. It's like, we just need to appeal. Like, if you and I are disagreeing about something, Shane, I don't want it to be
Which
about.
Which never happens.
No, we are just.
We're on the same page for everything.
Right. Lockstep. But I
am patriotic, though.
Well, there you go. Thanks for throwing me under the bus there. I appreciate that.
See, but I would push back against you a little bit, Ed.
Yeah.
Because I would say, given the time, given the space, given the situational context, I think you would find yourself more patriotic than you believe.
That may be a different conversation for another time.
Yeah. I would just say that. I would just say that, and I think that not to argue, for your patriotism or against your patriotism, but I think that, when you think about nation states, right, our sense of belonging within the context of a nation state, right, there's something to be said about belonging.
Sure,
right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think you're just such a collectivistic person. Like, you love unity, you love people coming together. You want people to be humanized.
Right.
And you have a lot of empathy. And I think, generally speaking, the U.S. just has like a reputation for being like all about individualism. So I can understand that conflict for sure, because I've had that too. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, Rod, if you were a big time conservative person and I'm a big time liberal person, and just leave it in those generalities, not get any more specific than
absolutely.
that. Like, I wouldn't come to you to have a conversation and appeal to you as a fellow American. That wouldn't be my motivation. It would be as a fellow human being.
Absolutely, I get that too.
As a brother in the human family, let's have a conversation and try to work this out.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you. I don't disagree with you at all. I think what has happened, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that, the conversation, almost probably ad nauseum in our country now, right? In our society, is that, as a people, right? Whether you want to call us Americans, right? There's this massive push to vilify each other.
Yes.
Even on the basis of being, Americans. You're not patriotic. You're not American. Let's make America great again. All these things speak to this notion, right, of a lost people. And I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. And I think, I agree with you 100% on the whole humanity piece. That's me too.
Yeah.
And I think that when you destroy or deconstruct what it means to be a particular people, right? And then who are we?
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's the struggle too. Is there's that sense of we as Americans, and but like, what does that even mean? What does it mean to be American?
Exactly.
Right. It goes back to definitions.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, how do you define that?
Right.
Yeah.
And even aside from the whole idea of make America great again, and the whole idea of like America's for real Americans, like stuff from like the 50s and 40s or whatever, that junk. Just thinking about knowing the heritage of America
Sure.
on a justice and equity level.
Sure.
That's hard when you have different like for me, I'm an American citizen, I was born in America, but I don't have a sense of pride in that because I look at this history,
Sure.
and I see that, and it makes me sick, especially when I know that other folks don't really want to see that. That's another conversation to have at another time.
We'll be back.
Yes.
Well, I think for me it's I recognize that all of humanity is imperfect.
Yeah.
I don't think you can go to any nation, any place on this globe, in this world, where you will find that particular society to be the paragon of perfection.
Yeah.
Right. Some countries are worse than others. Right. But I do know and understand that even in this country, we enjoy certain privileges that people throughout the world don't.
Yes.
Right. Yes, we have a very beleaguered and imperfect history. Right. But also, too, in many respects, it's been fortuitous for many of us, right?
Yeah.
And I like to try to remind myself, yes, of the sordid history, right? But also always looking towards, right, the best in what we can offer each other in our humanity, right? And I think that's what I cling to.
Yeah.
No, but when you think about the past, yes, it is painful.
Yeah. No, it's good though. What you're saying is important for us to remember. Like, there's the idea of expressing grace, and I don't mean that blindly, like excusing behaviors and excusing history, but learning to live in grace toward others, especially when, this is a little bit different, but when people make mistakes, and say something they shouldn't say, not dehumanizing them.
Sure.
For saying those things or believing that way or whatever. So,
having this conversation is really making me think, and I don't know why I love it so much, but just having this conversation here in the moment has made me think about, why do I love Hamilton so much, the play? I mean, I literally...
Because it's a genius play.
It is genius, but think about it though.
Yeah.
Think about it. You have a cast of essentially the star cast of people of color, right?
It's an amazing story. Amazing.
Of forefathers of this country who were all white men.
Yep.
I mean, think about what that means socially.
Right.
Yep. Think about that, the power in that. And I'm just like, why? I'm just sitting here thinking, why am I so captivated by that? Yes, it is genius, but also it says something about the narrative of what we are as a people.
Right.
Right? It's just, I don't know. It just made me think of that, and I think, when you have, I listen to, what's going on in other countries right now, where there are really efforts being made, and we have to be watchful of this too, to really, close off, right? The free press, it's happening.
Right.
It's happening, and if we're not careful, if we don't safeguard, what we've constructed here in our country, we can face those same risks as well.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's why it's important for us to have these conversations, right? And to unpack the complexity of these things, right? And even speak to people who may disagree with us,
Yes.
right? Because there's something to be said about the essence and importance of disagreement too.
Yep.
Absolutely.
You may not ever agree with me, but you know my position, I know your position.
Right. And how can we love each other in the middle of that?
There's a level of respect there too.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you only find yourself in a group of people that is like-minded, that agrees with everything that you say, you really aren't learning as much as you can.
Sure.
Even if you don't
Yeah.
like where you are in terms of a space where somebody really is whether they're emotional or really passionate about what they feel and vice versa. Like, I think that if you're listening and willing to listen, you'll have really good conversations that you'll learn something out of it, whether it's to validate and confirm where you're at and, or to kind of see, okay, I think I kind of get where this person's coming from.
Sure.
And so I think we need to have more of those. That's why I like these spaces a lot, and that's why I love the show.
Well,
and even if it doesn't change your position, at least it allow you to pause and think about, right? Your own position.
In a non-emotional way.
Right.
In some ways, yeah.
And so there's learning, there's growth in that.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
absolutely. Well, listen, I could talk to y'all all night long, and I would just love it. But I got to get home and hang out with my family tonight, and I know y'all got to do some of that same kind of stuff too. So I have absolutely loved catching up with you two. And
Yeah, it's been fun.
yeah, we'll have you again. We'll talk again soon. I'm sure. Rod is a stalwart. Is an institution when it comes to conversations in color.
Yeah, you're too nice.
And Shang, I'm hoping that we get to see you more too.
Yeah.
So
I'll be back for sure.
all right. Well, y'all have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Appreciate it.